Welcome to this week's hydroponics update. In this week's video, I'm going to take you through the process to extend the system upwards. But first, let's get an update on the grow. Bok choy, we broke off all the big leaves last week, more big leaves. Basil, we cut that back quite aggressively last week and made a big tub of pesto. It's bouncing back quite well. They're the only original plants in the system. The chilies have progressed and a lot of them are showing signs of developing flowers. That pak choi that I probably put into the system before the roots were quite ready has bounced back and is growing well now. Some of them are getting quite big. Down here in the propagation system, we've got a chili that's going a little bit out of control, but the light's not intense enough for it, so it's not looking that healthy. We've also got that wasabi rocket growing back. It turns out that's got a really tasty little leaf. Tastes a lot like wasabi, funnily enough. Under the dome, we've got the 4-week-old coriander and basil, as well as 1-week-old coriander shoots. So this week after the big expansion, we'll move that chili out of there into the main system under a more appropriate light, and we'll give that wasabi rocket a chance to keep growing. So that's the short update. Stick around if you want to see the build for the extension. First, I'm going to make some new NFT rails, just like this one. I'm going to be using this 100 by 65 millimeter PVC downpipe. I'm using the 65 millimeter just to stay consistent with my existing rails. If I had my time again, I would probably use the 50 millimeter by 100 millimeter downpipe, just because I don't think the extra 15 millimeters makes much difference. We obviously need water flowing out of only one end of these rails. That means we need to close up the ends, and we'll go through that now. So I've seen people do this a lot of ways, but this is my method, and these are the tools I use. I use a heat gun, a Dremel with the cutting wheel, some measuring pliers. I use some clamps usually, a couple of blocks of wood, including one that has a profile that fits inside the end of the rail and is cut at a 45. Then I'll position my block. I put it about 35 millimeters or 1.5 inches in, and then I'll clamp that down with this piece of wood running roughly along the top edge of that 45. Now that clamp will compress the pipe onto the wooden block inside so that it holds the whole lot in place. Now we just heat this up until it goes soft. It's much easier to touch hot plastic when you've got gloves on. And that block of wood on the inside acts as a bit of a heat sink, so it stops it melting too far back. See, that's getting soft and bendy now, but it's still a bit hard down around the sides, so I want to fold that whole thing in. All right. Now the first step is I push this all down. All right. So that's hardened up a little bit more. Now I'm gonna heat it up some more. I can do one side at a time now. Right, and here's where I grab the clamps. So if I can get one of those on there, that'll just hold it in nice and tight. And another one on there. And that just holds it all in nice and tight while the plastic cools down. Alright, that should have cooled down a bit by now. And let's do it on the other side. Now, here's where the Dremel comes in. I'm going to cut straight along there and there. Then I'm going to cut downwards along there, so this just folds in to level with there. Now heat gun again, and this time pliers. Now if I don't use pliers like this to hold this together, then it'll all pop out and that tight fold we've got will be undone. Now you need to heat the inside of the fold quite thoroughly, but you also need the outside to bend, and careful not to burn yourself with the heat gun. And the tighter you push that while it's cooling, the tighter the fold will be at the end. Yep, that's cool. And repeat on the other side. All right, now I'm just going to use the Dremel to straighten up that line there. And now the last fold. I'll hit it from underneath. And then keep the pressure on it until it cools down. Right, and that's done. Now the next stage is to cut the tops out of these to make open channels, because I'm going to put a removable lid on top with square holes just like the rails I've already got. I'm just doing that for consistency. Now you can see when you cut the lid piece down the sides, it wants to, these bits want to fold in. Now my concern is if we cut the full length of the top out, the sides in the middle might want to bow in because they don't have that plastic pushing them out. So we'll leave a bridge in the center. With my existing rails, I actually did thirds. I did a bridge each third of the way, and in hindsight, I think that was probably not needed. So with this lot, I'm just going to go one in the center and maybe one of them slightly off center in case we want to have a hole right in the center. Anyway, now I'll measure up and I'll get the jigsaw. So now I'm going to try using a little hole saw to get my corners. Now you've got to be careful because the teeth can cut. So get it started in the forward direction. This is a tip from Hucho. Change it to reverse. Yeah, that's all right. Now my corners are drilled out, I can join the dots with a jigsaw. And there we have 3 rails with the tops cut out. Now I'll clean those up a little bit and then we'll get onto the lids. Now to clean up these rough edges along here, I use this handy little deburring tool. So for my channel lids, I've got the 50 by 100 mil rectangular downpipe. I've taped up the ends because that'll catch most of the plastic when I run it over my table saw. Now, I didn't cut all the way from end to end. I left these bits on the ends. And that's because if I do cut all the way from end to end, then the whole thing clamps together and grips the circular saw blade, which can tear big chunks in the PVC or just split it open entirely. So I'll finish off those ends with the Dremel. Both those sides are done and we've got 2 lids. So I've got 4 lids now. I only need 3, but I'll just show you how this pops onto the top of this rail. So I'll just take it and it should just pop on like that. It's like it was made to fit. So I'll obviously have to cut that to length and then cut my holes in the top. And just for consistency, I'm going to go with square holes, but I may regret that once I've cut a few. But before I cut any holes, I'm going to start working on the Offtake plumbing. So what's the Offtake plumbing? If we go over here, you see the water runs into the channel at this end, flows down the channel, it's got to run out somewhere. This is the Offtake plumbing that I've done for the first level. Obviously, I need to work out a way to attach that to another level up, but I'm going to start with this cross piece here. My level 1 Offtake plumbing has one continuous slot that the channels just slot into, and it has a kind of folded up flap of plastic that runs along the top, and that actually helps hold everything into place. On the second layer, because I only want to do 3 channels, I don't want so much of a opening in the tube, so I'm going to actually cut 3 individual holes. So I've already set up my channels on the bench at the correct spacing. I've squared this first one off with the edge of the table, and then I've measured off that one and clamped it in place. I don't have anything to clamp the middle one to, but I've put a mark in the center so I can line that up later. Now I've set them all up on these blocks of wood, which all happen to be the same width. And coincidentally, those blocks I had are about the right height for where I want to position my 100mm pipe. So now I'm going to position my 100mm pipe on the edge of the table like that. And see, I've put just a piece of wood under one end, so it's got a downward slope. Now you can see here with the rail that's at the top of the slope, this is the depth of water that will be able to be held in the pipe here. If that gets too shallow and too much water runs down the tube, then you might get some overflow. So I think that's deep enough. And then at the other end, you can see that the level of the top of the rail is right at the top of the pipe. So it's only just going to fit in there without popping out of the top of the pipe. Once we fold that up, I think it'll just go nicely. And of course, there's plenty of depth down here because of the downward slope. So now I'm going to mark under the bottom here and under the bottom here, and then the top. I might do that a bit more accurately off camera. So this is to give me a good indicator of the top of where the channel will sit, and I'll do the same along the bottom. There's the straight line along the bottom. I've marked the sides of where the rails are going to sit. Those are just rough, and of course we don't cut along that top line. That's just there as a guide, so I know how far up to cut the slots. And so we'll cut those, then we'll get the heat gun out and we'll fold that flap up. So when we work out where the slots need to go up the sides of the holes, the important lines are the end ones, because the edges of the rails are limited by the size of the rack. So I'm going to mark my source of truth line on the end here. That's our end measurement there. The next important line is the midpoint. That is there. Now I think I'm going to make each hole 120mm wide. That's about 4 3/4 inches. That'll give us some wriggle room for those 100mm wide rails. So we're all measured up. So I like to start my cuts with the cutting wheel on the Dremel, and then I finish off with the jigsaw because it makes a much cleaner cut.
Will you put the sheets in the laundry before you come up?
Yes, dear. Not the straightest cuts, but should do the job. Let's get the heat gun out. I'm going to clamp it so that the bottom edge aligns with the bottom of the channels. Right, so I'll push these back a bit. metal ruler, gloves, heat gun. So I'm going to stick the metal ruler in this slot, so that way when it gets soft and wants to roll in, I can use this to kind of lever it out. So I want to soften the whole piece of flap. I don't just want to soften along the fold, because I want to be able to flatten out the pipe. Right, that's one done. So that's done. The rails all fit in there nicely. We've got our downward slope right from this little hump at the top, and as it slopes down, we've actually got this one sitting above the top. So the water should drain from there nicely. And now I've got one last job for the heat gun. What I want to do here is make a little drainage spout for where the nutrient flows out of the pipe at the end. Now, I've put the wooden block in there to stop the pipe from deforming significantly around the corners and so on. It doesn't need to be anything too big, and in fact it won't fit in my holes if it is. I just want to get it nice and loose. Yeah, I reckon. Should have been wearing my gloves. And that's 3 NFT rails with drainage spouts. The only thing I've got left to do here is cut those lids to length and cut the square holes in the tops. And I don't really feel like doing that right now. So I think I'm gonna work on the Offtake plumbing. And to do that, I'm gonna have to clear some space and shut the system down so I can pull this end piece off and rearrange things a bit. So my plan for the existing plumbing is to take this elbow off the end and exchange it for this T-piece. So I'm going to do that now, and that way I should be able to reattach the Offtake plumbing to the system and I can turn it all back on again. Okay, so we just moved inside due to inclement weather, and what we're going to do now is glue this reducer in at as close to the same orientation as possible. And then we're going to attach this piece to the existing main Offtake pipe. So now I've got level 1 back together. I might just pull those blocks out and turn the pump back on, get the water running again. Right, so that's all put back together, and we've got a good water flow down there, the root's hanging back down the drain. And I've set up the next 3 rails on top where they'll be positioned. I've got the Offtake plumbing sitting on the end, but obviously I need to cut that to length. And in case you hadn't guessed, the plan is to put that on the end there, which will hook up with that down there. Looks like the rain stopped. I'll grab the saw and then we'll cut the ends off this. Okay, so I've got the end cap glued on, and I actually use the Dremel to cut that out there so that that fits nicely, so that the elbow doesn't stick out too far. I'm going to use this flexible coupling with hose clamps to attach that to that, but I've just noticed we've got a leak. This join here, and that means I'm going to have to turn everything off, lift up the feet again, pull this all apart and glue it. Okay, that was a drama, but that's now been glued and it's not dripping anymore. So, back to where we were. Yeah. So that's clipped onto the end quite nicely there. And that appears to be pointed roughly down at that opening. Let's Right, that lines up, so now I just have to push that all the way in and attach that flexible coupling. But I think I might wait and do that until last in case I need to pull all of this off again for whatever reason. Now that that second level of channel is almost ready to go, I need to start thinking about the frame that will sit above that. That's mostly for the light to hang off, but I'll also attach my feed-in plumbing to that. Now the light that I plan to use has an adjustable height hanging system. So to work out how high I need this frame to go, I need to think about the maximum height of the plants that I intend to grow in there, and then add on the height of the light itself plus the hanging system when it is pulled up as high as it'll go. So that could end up being quite a height above the system as it is. But I won't know what that looks like until I unbox the light, put it together and check out this hanging system. I've done a much more detailed video about the light. It's a Spider Farmer G4500. If you're interested in the details of that, check out the link in the description. This clip clips on here, and when you take it all the way up as tight as it'll go to there, this is the height I'm looking for, so I can factor that into my frame build. 30 centimeters, 12 inches. I know I can always lower the light, and I don't know how high my plants are going to grow. I've decided I'm just going to make these as long as I can. That is a smidge over 3 meters. Right, so I've got the saw out for the last time, I hope. I've measured up all my bits of PVC because I don't want to get that saw out again. So hopefully these are the last of the cuts, and hopefully we can get them done before it starts raining again. So with the PVC all cut to length now, I can show you how this is going to go together. Now these are tall. This is going to be an epic tower of a rack. So these will be my corner uprights. In the middle, between these, will be a cross piece like that, and with an elbow like that. That'll be each side, and then the 25mm will come out this way and across to the same thing on the other side. I am going to set up a 25mm cross piece like this closer to the top of the other rack, so I don't have to run plumbing all the way up to the top and hoses hang all the way down. But I'm going to knock all of that together now. And there's the result with everything knocked tightly into place. That is ridiculously high. Yeah, now that it's up there, I'll concede that those 1.5 metre corner posts were probably a bit ridiculous, but the light hanger will let me lower it as low as it needs to go, so it's going to work. Now I'm keen to see what it's going to look like with the light up there. Let's hang it. And there we have it with the light hanging. It's coming together. I'm not going to spend too much time going through this feed-in plumbing, but what I'll effectively be looking to do is replicate this setup up here. I'll only have 3 feed-in hoses up here, but each will have a tap in it coming off a 19mm to 13mm hose. I just do the 13mm because it's less likely to get blocked up. At this end, I'll just be replacing this elbow with a T and continue that 19mm tube up to the second level. And just like that, it's done. I've also put in a tap here so I can cut off the whole top level. I now need to drill some holes in the top of my rails to feed these hoses into, and I'll tie it all in place with some cable ties. Then I just need to go over here and connect up this Offtake plumbing, and it'll be ready to start running some water through it. And saving the best till last, I'll come back and I'll cut the holes for the plants to go in the top of these channel lids. right, those hoses are now sticking into the channel. I'll just hook up this Offtake plumbing down here, and then we might turn the pump on to see how the water flows. Connected. And now for the moment of truth. Plugging in the pump now. Here comes the water. Well, it's flowing well enough. Those taps are fully open. No obvious leaks. Now I'll adjust these taps just to get a thin film of water flowing down the channels. And I think that looks about right to me. I mean, I don't know what it's meant to look like, but about that is working down below. So it looks like it's time to knock some holes in this lid now. Okay, starting at the bottom of the channel, I've marked where the lid disappears into the Offtake plumbing. Then coming up into the middle, I've marked where the bridge in the channel underneath sits, and then the top of the opening in the pipe underneath at the top of the channel. I think for now, I'll just do 3 holes because the other 2 chili rails have got 4, so that means there's 3 gaps and I want to stagger them. I think I've only got 2 chili seedlings ready to go anyway. Anyway, since we're doing 3 holes, we can start in the center or just off center next to where that bridge in the channel underneath sits, and then we'll go to 35 centimeters in either direction, which is the spacing that I think is going to work. So we're marking for 32 millimeter holes because that's the size of the grow cubes that I've been using. So this is how I did it last time. It's probably not the best way to do it. I think a multi-tool might be better than this, but a chisel's all I've got. Now you do have to be a little bit careful not to crack the PVC, so don't hit it too hard. Anyway, this is pretty boring. I'm not going to make you watch. Ah, you're fucking kidding me. Okay, that didn't happen when I was doing any of the first 4 rails. I can't freaking believe it. Lucky I've got a spare, but that means I'm gonna have to get the saw out again. Okay, I've got a second piece marked out. I'm not gonna use the chisel again. I'm gonna find a different way. Okay, that's the messy way of doing it, but at least I've done one without splitting the whole lid in half. I do like to finish these off with the deburring tool. I just run it around the outside of the hole, take off any sharp edges. Now finally we check the hole size. Perfect. And on that note, I'm going to put the camera down, rearrange a few things, and we'll check back in with the new configuration. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my double-story garage NFT. These things always take longer than you expect, so I've still got 2 rails on that first level that don't have any holes or any plants in them, but we'll fix that up next weekend. And on this second level, all of the chilies have been moved up under a light that's more suitable for flowering and fruiting. Now, I haven't really discussed the light since I turned it on, but looking at that, you can see it's a much more orange glow than what we have down here under the veg lights. I've got it set at 60% at this stage, so when I turn that up, let's have a look at what it does. Doesn't look like that much. Honestly, I'm not really sure what brightness level I should have the light set to at this stage of the plant's development, and I'm also not really sure how far above the plants I should raise it. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, please leave me a comment. When I started this extension, I wasn't really expecting to end up with the epic PVC tower that this has turned into, but it's actually pretty cool, I reckon. Anyways, well done if you followed along for this long. Hopefully you took something out of this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the thumbs up and keep an eye on my channel if you'd like to see how this crop develops and what systems I get into in future. Hydroponics.